Imagine you're standing in a grocery store line, and the person in front of you, who is clearly struggling to pay for their basic needs, spends their last $20 on lottery tickets. Your logical brain screams, "That's crazy. That money could have bought dinner for 2 days." You walk away thinking they are financially illiterate. But if you want to understand the true psychology of money, you have to stop judging and start observing. Because the first lesson of wealth is this: no one is crazy. Morgan Housel, in the first chapter of his book, reveals a startling statistic. The lowest income households in the US spend an average of $412 a year on lottery tickets. To someone with a stable savings account, that's an error in judgment. But to the person buying the ticket, it's the only time in their week they get to dream about a life they otherwise have zero access to. They aren't buying a probability, they are buying hope. In their world, that $20 is a small price for a moment of possibility. This is the observer perspective. Every financial decision people make is based on a unique set of experiences that you haven't lived through. Think about your own history. Your personal experience with how the world works represents maybe 0.000000001% of what has actually happened in history, but it accounts for about 80% of how you think the world works. We all walk around with a different financial lens strapped to our faces. Let's look at a real-life example. Imagine two investors, John and Sarah. John was born in 1950. When he was in his late 20s, the prime time to start investing, the stock market was a graveyard. It basically went nowhere for a decade. To John, the stock market feels like a dangerous trap. Now look at Sarah, born in 1970. When she was in her 20s, the market was a rocket ship. Everything she touched turned to gold. Neither John nor Sarah is smarter than the other. They are both looking at the same stock market, but they see two different worlds. John sees a monster, Sarah sees a miracle. They aren't being logical, they are being human. They are reacting to the scars and the wins of their own youth. This explains why your parents might be obsessed with safe government jobs and gold, while you might be comfortable with the volatility of a startup or digital assets. You aren't braver than them, and they aren't stuck in the past. They are simply reacting to a world where they saw stability crumble, while you grew up in a world where technology and rapid growth were the only constants. We often treat finance like it's a branch of physics, full of hard rules and mathematical certainties. If you do A, you get B. But in reality, finance is a branch of psychology. It's a messy, emotional, and deeply personal reaction to the world around us. When you see a neighbor buy a massive SUV they can't afford, you're seeing the what, but not the why. Maybe they grew up feeling invisible, and that car is the first time they feel respected. When you see a friend refuse to invest even a penny in the market, maybe you aren't seeing fear, but the memory of a father who lost the family home in a market crash. As an observer of these stories, I've learned that the goal isn't to be the smartest person in the room with the best spreadsheet. The goal is to be the person who understands their own biases. The next time you're about to call someone's money move dumb or crazy, pause. Ask yourself, what have they experienced that I haven't? Because once you understand the story, the crazy decisions usually start to make a lot of sense. Your bank account is a reflection of your math, but your spending is a reflection of your life. Imagine it's 1968. There are roughly 300 million high school-aged kids in the world. Out of all those millions, only about 300 of them happen to attend a specific school in Seattle called Lakeside. Why does this matter? Because Lakeside was the only high school in the world that had a computer. One of the students at that school was a young boy named Bill Gates. If Bill Gates hadn't attended the one school in the world with a computer, there's almost no chance Microsoft would exist today. Gates himself admits this. This is the power of luck. But most of us hate talking about luck. It makes us feel like we aren't in control. However, if you want to be a true observer of how wealth is built, you have to understand the lesson of Chapter 2. Luck and risk are siblings. They are two sides of the same coin, and they both represent forces outside of your control that have a greater impact on your life than you'd like to admit. Think about it this way. Every time you make a decision, you're taking a swing at a moving target. You can have the best form, the best equipment, and the best aim, but a sudden gust of wind, something totally outside of your control, can knock your arrow off course. If the wind blows your arrow into the bullseye, we call it luck. If the wind blows it into the dirt, we call it risk. In both cases, the result had nothing to do with your skill. To understand the darker side of this, we have to look at the story of Kent Evans. Kent was Bill Gates' best friend at Lakeside. They were a duo. Gates says they would have started Microsoft together. Kent was just as smart, just as talented, and had the same access to that 1-in-a-million computer. But Kent Evans never became a billionaire. He died in a mountaineering accident before he graduated high school. The odds of dying on a mountain in high school are roughly 1 in a million. The odds of having access to a computer in 1968 were also roughly 1 in a million. One friend felt the extreme tail end of luck. The other felt the extreme tail end of risk. They both made the same smart choices, but the world moved in ways they couldn't predict. This is why judging people based on their financial results is so dangerous. When we see a successful CEO, we call them a visionary and study their bold moves. But if those same moves had failed because of a slight change in the economy, we would have called them reckless and stupid. The decision was the same. The result was just influenced by the wind of luck or risk. As an observer, how do you use this knowledge? First, you stop looking at extreme outliers. Don't try to copy Bill Gates or Warren Buffett. Their success is so extreme that luck played an undeniable, unrepeatable role. Instead, look for patterns. If you see that 90% of people who save consistently and invest in broad markets retire wealthy, that's a pattern you can follow. Luck might make one person a billionaire, but the pattern will make 1,000 people comfortable. Second, you must learn to be humble when things go well and compassionate when they don't. When you win, realize it wasn't just your brilliance, you had a tailwind. When you lose, realize you aren't necessarily a failure, you might have just hit a patch of risk. In the psychology of money, your ego wants to take all the credit for your wins and blame the world for your losses, but the observer knows better. Nothing is as good or as bad as it seems. Success and failure are often just the result of which way the wind happened to blow that day. Respect luck, prepare for risk, and focus on the things you can control. Imagine a man who has everything. His name is Rajat Gupta. Born as an orphan in India, he fought his way to the very top of the world. He became the CEO of McKinsey, the most prestigious consulting firm on the planet. By the time he retired, he was worth a staggering $100 million. Think about that amount for a second. 100 million. If you put that in a basic bank account, you would earn enough interest to spend $600 every single hour of every single day for the rest of your life. Most people would call that enough. But Rajat Gupta had a problem. He didn't want to be a multimillionaire. He wanted to be a billionaire. He was looking at people like Bill Gates and Warren Buffett, and suddenly his 100 million felt small. In 2008, during the height of the financial crisis, Gupta sat on the board of Goldman Sachs. He heard a secret. Warren Buffett was about to invest $5 billion into the bank. Instead of staying silent, he hung up the phone and immediately called a hedge fund manager to leak the news. He traded his reputation, his freedom, and his legacy just to add a few more zeros to a bank account he already couldn't spend in a lifetime. He went to prison. He lost everything. This is the focus of our third observation into the psychology of money. The hardest financial skill is getting the goalpost to stop moving. Why do smart people with enough money risk everything for more? It's because of social comparison. Comparison is a ceiling that doesn't exist. If you are a successful doctor, you compare yourself to the local business owner. The business owner compares himself to the hedge fund manager. The hedge fund manager compares himself to Elon Musk. It is a battle you can never win because there is always someone higher up. The only way to win the game is to stop playing. Having a sense of enough does not mean you are lazy. It doesn't mean you have no ambition. It simply means you realize that the appetite for more will eventually lead you to a point of regret. It means knowing that an insatiable appetite will eventually push you to the point where you risk what you need for something you don't even want. As an observer, I want you to memorize this list. These are the things that are never worth risking, no matter the potential gain. Your reputation, your freedom, your family and friends, being loved by those you want to love you, and your happiness. Most financial advice tells you how to get more, but the best financial advice, the kind that keeps you out of Rajat Gupta's shoes, tells you when to stop. Happiness, as it turns out, is just results minus expectations. If your expectations keep growing faster than your results, you will be miserable even as you get rich. Real wealth is not about having the most. It's about having the freedom to say, I have enough. I am the Observer, and I'll see you in Chapter 4.